All right, thank you very much, Emma, for joining me today. So just a quick recap. You're the director of Crashing Waves, which is a short film that won the Critics Award at the latest Emerging Filmmakers Night event. So that was live streamed on Facebook for those who managed to catch it. It's a really, really, really beautiful little short. It was a real hit with the three members of the jury, of which I was part of. And it was amongst 7 really, really strong films. So it was quite a tough decision, but it stood out. And I think the points that I'd stressed that made it really stand out were how efficient it was at communicating such a complex and nuanced relationship without any dialogue, and purely through a mix of body movement, dance, choreography, and camera angles, which show real skill as a filmmaker and as a director of performers. So thanks very much, Emma. So we'll just go over your background as a filmmaker and the making of Crashing Waves. But first of all, I just wanted to know how it was for you, the experience of being part of this live streamed event. How was it?
I mean, actually, I think the benefits of doing something that's live streamed is that, say, for example, if you can't afford to get somewhere, like, you can still be a part of that film festival. Because I definitely have gotten festivals before where I haven't been able to afford to go to them. So actually it was really nice, and having that like interaction over the chat, you can see like how people are responding to your films, you can respond to their films. So it felt like a really nice community, and I actually really enjoyed it, and the other films were so good as well. So it's actually quite shocked, but yeah.
Were there any comments on the night or questions that someone might have put to you that that struck you as particularly relevant or made you think differently about the film?
Actually, something that you mentioned about how the lines were really straight, but the choreography was really like smooth. It's just, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about the film in pre-production, but that was just one thing that never actually struck me. So that was quite interesting, because that was not done intentionally. I think I always imagined it being set on a council estate because I wanted it to feel like there was an audience. So that I thought it would dramatize this sense of like paranoia when you're in like a private queer relationship. So that's why we use like the really like tall towering buildings, because I just wanted to dramatize that feeling. But I thought that was like a really interesting observation, that may, to be honest with you, like Joshua might have choreographed it very intentionally that way. So that was really nice. Yeah. I can't think of a question though, sorry.
That's all right. That's funnily enough, that's something that all 3 of us judges noticed. So without communicating between us, once we were talking about the film, so we found both of us talking about the use of architecture and just the visual contrast between those kind of looming, very menacing buildings, very rigid, very stern, very kind of this very strict architecture, and the very fluid motions of the 2 dancers. And you mentioned Joshua, so that's your choreographer. So can you tell us a bit more about how the collaboration with him started?
Yeah, so the idea for it came into my head. I'd seen this music video called Shame by Young Fathers, and Joshua was in that music video. And when we first were being told about the Random Acts initiative and Screen South came to the school, I was thinking about that music video in particular, and I thought, oh, like, I don't know how many times I've seen like men in trackies dance, especially like queer men, and it was that music video that like kind of just planted a seed in my head. And I was working on the story, and I knew I wanted to have like the brutalist architecture, and I got in touch with Josh thinking that there'd be absolutely no way he'd want to do it, but he did. And it was just such a nice process. Like, I really enjoy that side of working with artists, especially like art forms that you don't necessarily see in filmmaking, because it's almost like, I don't know, it's just like I can't describe it. It's just so satisfying. So when Josh came on board, it was like we had conversations about characters and life experiences that we shared, and actually not so much about dance. This was the thing, but it was just like, yeah, like things that we had in common and experiences we had in common, and talking about the story and what it represented and why it was set where it was and why they were dressed the way they were dressed. My voice went a little bit then. And I just forgot. I can't remember what I was saying, but he was amazing to work with, and he just brought so much to that film. Like, I think the choreography is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah. You mentioned school just now. Can you tell us a bit more about where you're at as in your career as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a student. I guess like making it in the film industry is really hard. I'm currently doing my master's degree at the National Film and Television School. And before here, I studied at the University of Creative Arts. So once I was like in my final year, well, when I was in my final year at University of Creative Arts, that's when Screen South came in. And it was just like on the tail end of graduating is when we started making that film. So yeah, I took a year in between and I did 2 internships, but I still consider myself a student. Like I feel like I'm on the cusp, maybe. I hope I try to be as positive as possible.
And prior to Crashing Waves, what sort of shorts had you made? What sort of themes had you approached? Stylistically, was this completely new, or were you already looking into these various forms of art in your previous work?
I think stylistically it was new, but I mean, at this point now, I've been making stuff for like 10 years, like, and not good stuff either, just a lot of like, I always know the subject matter that I love and I'm drawn towards, and it's like people who are working class, people who you might judge upon first impression, women, queer characters, but typically it's people on the fringe who are kind of invisible in society. They're the type of characters that I absolutely just am magnetized towards. But stylistically, I mean, I've been making stuff like really cheap, low budget, just maybe me and a friend, or like progressively as I've gone through education, I've been making more and more with bigger budgets. But I had done the odd like kind of experimental thing here and there. Like I did an animation project, and I had done like a dance documentary. I don't really know how to explain it. It wasn't the same level as Crashing Waves though.
Mm-hmm.
And I came from a background of when I was 14 and 15 doing musical theatre,
Right.
and
Okay.
singing and a little bit of dance. And I've actually Crashing Waves like opened this door for me that allowed me to step into new experimental things. So I actually just did a satire musical at the National Film and Television School, and it's all about like politics and caricature and these 2 people fighting at a Christmas dinner table. But I think it's that interest has always been there, but for some reason I was just kind of too scared to act on it until we did Crashing Waves.
Emma, could you tell us a bit more about the casting process?
I mean, the casting process was really easy because I just reached out to Joshua Hubbard and was like, yeah, I really like you. I'm interested in you possibly like choreographing and starring in the film. And then we got Joshua Hubbard, and then I asked him like, is there any other dancers that you know that you have good chemistry with that you would like to work with on the project? So then he recommended Phoenix, and when I met Phoenix, I knew they were just right for it as well. So like, yeah, it was it was actually quite a simple casting process, because they just sent me showreels and I knew Joshua Hubbard's work. So yeah, it was there wasn't too much to it. And actually the 5 guys at the end are all my friends who I managed to convince to be in the film.
And how did you find the experience of directing them?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit different from a normal project because I wrote a script and then I started working with the composer Tanner Allen, and I was like, yeah, like it was quite technical when I was working with him actually, because I was like, I think between like 0 to 43 seconds I want to communicate this, and I actually just kind of give him like this emotional mapping of the whole script, which then he turned into music. And I remember being quite I don't know the right word, but I remember being very sure about I wanted to include soundscape within the music, and then he did his thing and created this track which I listened to and I was like, I love it. And then it was a similar process to working with Joshua, so I give him the music and I was like, yeah, I think between these times this is what I'm trying to convey. Went through like each section and then left Joshua to it for a day, came back and he'd choreograph half the dance, and it was just like, well, that's definitely better than anything I could have come up with. And yeah, so then once we had the whole choreography, we were on set, it was a case of like, okay, so I want to capture from this. I had to learn the dance also so that I could explain to him, like he didn't teach me. I just watched, I recorded the sessions and then like I was watching them in my room and I wrote all this into the script then. So the script literally covered every bit of movement of the dance. And then I was like, when I was planning shots, I was like literally drawing like a tram line and like being like, okay, this is a section, so that when I could speak to Joshua on set, I could be like, okay, so this movement to this movement. Like I'd very badly do it, but I had to know it in order to like be able to know how to shoot it. And with, I'm trying to just think, sorry, my brain's a little bit, yeah, it was just basically like a very unusual process, because normally like if I'm like breaking down another person's script, I'll break it into chunks of like what the changes are, whereas like the changes kind of existed almost before anything else did in a way. So yeah, it was really cool. But I love working that way too. Anything that where like music comes first is just like, I don't know, it's just really exciting.
Yeah. And now what's the outcome in terms of the trajectory of the film, so to speak? Are you sending it to festivals? Where are you submitting it?
It's actually like it's been to a few already. When we sent it back to like Screen South and it went to Channel 4, it got picked up for broadcast for Random Acts like summer 2018. So it did pretty well, and then it got picked up for the Iris Prize, and it didn't win, but it got nominated for it, and also it did well on BFI's 5 Films for Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So like it like circulated quite a bit then as well, which was pretty good. I think, I'm not sure, like I think we might enter it to a few more festivals over the next few weeks as well.
And in terms of your work as a young filmmaker, what advice would you have for, I guess, fellow aspiring filmmakers that might not got into film school or are just starting out? What's the best piece of advice you could give them?
Just be truthful. Like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable and look at your, like, be truthful about the experiences that you show in film. Like, yeah, that would be my main advice. But then also like almost contradictory to that, it would be like, you can use those feelings that are real and put it in something that is completely different. And you can, as long as like there's like a sense of truth connected to it, that doesn't actually dictate the way you tell it in a way.
Last question, what are you up to, given the current circumstances and the confinement and so on? What are your plans for the coming months?
So I'm actually working on a new film, which is about, it's set in 1965, and it's about two young women who are in love, but it's a secret. And one of the girls gets accused of being a witch. And I guess I'm just quite interested in like political scapegoats in a way, when people get blamed for something in order to like shift blame from like a bigger problem. And yeah, I feel like this piece might in a way work very well with Crashing Waves, because it's a lot of it is about gender roles and the way we're expected to act in public, and well, obviously the whole idea about two lovers who want to be together but feel like they can't. And so that's part of my grad film for NFTS, which is still going ahead and actually shoots in 6 weeks.
Oh wow.
Which is just wild. So we're having to like relearn how to like do things, but bearing in mind with COVID. So we went on a recce yesterday and we had to wear masks, and yeah, it's quite mad.
Have you had to change the scenes at all, or the interactions between the actors, or are you just
there's a system for like red, amber and green, so like the really dangerous scenes to shoot during COVID, like kissing scenes, which ironically would have been the most simple scene in my film but has now become like the most difficult. And also I feel very passionately about especially like on-screen lesbian romances, centering it more in love than sex, because I just feel like so many lesbian romance films, like not all of them but a lot of them, just have these silly over explicit sex scenes which aren't even sexy, they just like kind of border ridiculous. So I definitely wanted to play in this film with more with like sexual tension and emotion and like intimacy, which again I think is quite similar to Crashing Waves in the sense like they are vulnerable and they're intimate. And I'm very passionate about keeping this kissing scene in, but so I just realized that I've gone right on a tangent, like I've gone completely.
Well, it's a very interesting thing to discuss, really. I mean, it's unprecedented territory, so
yeah, it's bonkers. But yeah, so we have this system, and the stuff where it's like red example, okay, kissing scene, which I feel is like really important to keep, and I don't want to change it because it's focused more on love than sex anyway. We have to storyboard those scenes and kind of be in discussion with our tutors about it, but also like we've had to say to casting agents, we want these scenes to happen, so maybe if someone's not comfortable with this, like probably not worth doing our project. So yeah, it's a whole new way of working, but we don't really know how long COVID's going to be around for. So
thanks for your time.
No, thank you.